Hello, everyone. Welcome back. And for you new listeners, welcome to the Done Deal Show. I am your host, Tinashe and Tonje. I'm the CEO and founder of Society Studios. We are an influencer marketing agency that focuses on creative campaigns.
Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Tonje Bakeng, co-host of the Don't Deal Show. I'm also the CEO of OnScale. We are building the operating system for talent managers. We help talent managers pitch brands, but also execute brand deals. I'm very excited today because we have a special guest. Tinashe, please.
Of course, of course. So it's interesting actually how we fell upon our guest today. Katie, welcome to have you on the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. Excited to talk.
Yeah, and I know I was scrolling on LinkedIn when I came about one of your posts, and the moment I saw that and just kind of went into your profile, that was when I was like, okay, we need to put Katie on this podcast. So to get started, Katie, could you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I started in this whole creator economy space around 2009. I'm like kind of like a dinosaur in this industry, I feel like. But I knew I wanted to go into PR. That was like kind of my goal.
Mhm.
And I started in LA. I'm from Chicago, but moved out to LA and started working with a boutique fashion PR agency. And my entire job was to find celebrities that would wear our clothes. So it was very like reminiscent. I always tell the story. It's kind of like the foundation of what influencer marketing became. But this was before social media. Like there was
Mhm.
Facebook and Twitter essentially were it, and no one was like monetizing yet on social. But my job was very similar to what it is now, where I was trying to find influential people to promote brands. But back then it was like having them wear clothes that the paparazzi would shoot.
Yeah.
So that's how it started. Then I went and worked for 10 plus years at global PR agencies. I was at Ogilvy, Ketchum, and then Golan. And then most recently, I was at a growth marketing agency. So I did a lot with affiliate and performance marketing. So, like paid ads, which is kind of how the market has shifted, as we all know. So, really hitting kind of like every side. And all throughout my last probably 5 to 7 years, I've also managed talent more kind of for fun. I kind of call it like my hobby, and it's more just because I love bridging the gap between brand side and talent side and being able to kind of see what the talent goes through because it helps me with my brand work and vice versa. So I try to hit this industry from like every possible angle. And then most recently in February, I went off on my own. And now I'm completely independent brand consultant. I mostly do consults with brands, but I also again work with influencers. And I also recently created influencerinsiderguide.com, which is my educational suite. And I'm planning to build that out with more kind of like insider intel on how this whole creator economy works.
Okay, awesome. And it's interesting because of your experience, right? Coming really from that growth side and the marketing side, and where typically in a conversation, those where you come from is where a lot of the decision makers are helping, really influence what even it looks like on the influencer side. So I'm kind of curious, when you look at the talent managers that are listening to this, or even creators, what are things that you feel are misconceptions about how to properly work with the brand?
Oh God, that's a loaded question. There's so much. I mean, I was just talking to one of my friends, business partners, who did influencer guide with me, and we were saying how like it's almost like we speak different languages. Like it's almost like the brand people speak one language and the talent speaks another. And I think that's why it gets a little not competitive or defensive, but it can be like a little bit sticky sometimes because everyone wants the best for their side of what they're repping. If it's a talent manager, they want their talent to get the best deal because in turn they'll get the best outcome. And if it's a marketer on the brand side, especially an agency marketer, because there's a lot at stake when you work at an agency for your own position, for the position of the client, you want to get the best deal for them. So it kind of like the industry has turned into sort of like two-sided, and we're seeing people like me that are kind of on both sides. We're seeing companies like Whaler that rep talent but also rep brands. Like we're seeing it sort of more converge. But at the end of the day, like a negotiation is between a brand and a talent. So there's so many things that come up where one side thinks it should be done this way, one side thinks it should be done this way. And it's the best way to combat that is just open communication. I pride myself on just, being as transparent and open and building relationships because at the end of the day, it's people on both sides.
Okay, perfect. So kind of going off that, and I know a lot of what we're talking about is interesting. You talk about how really end of the day it's about the brand and the talent, but yet still there's kind of these, sometimes agency reaching out to a manager, then reaching out to, so there's always these kind of, pieces that kind of sway a lot of messaging and conversation. So I'm kind of curious from your perspective, what are those key things that you feel like make the process a lot smoother? Because especially where sometimes brand can't always be directly to the creator, but what are those things you've noticed where campaigns tend to go from like being smoother to less efficient?
Well, I would almost argue that brand direct to talent is the least smooth. Like I feel like you would think that like brand talking to influencer is the path of least resistance. I would argue that it's usually the
Mm-hmm.
worst. Usually,
Mm-hmm.
I would say in 90, I mean that's just a number, 90-ish% of brands are not directly reaching out to influencers and vice versa. Like you shouldn't be reaching out to like Kellogg. Like PR agencies are typically the the decision makers. Like they're running the marketing program or the comms program. As someone that came from PR agencies, I saw where budgets were allocated, and most of the time, communications falls under the PR or influencer falls under the communications umbrella, which is a PR piece. So I guess you know a smooth way for it to go about is brand here, their agency partner, which is typically like where I fell, then talent manager, and then talent. So it's usually those four levels, which it does seem more complicated that way. But the idea is that these two in the middle, these agency partners and these talent managers, are experts. Like the talent
Mm-hmm.
can negotiate for themselves. It's a lot harder to negotiate when you're negotiating for yourself.
Yeah.
That's why talent managers exist, is because they sort of take that pressure off
Mm-hmm.
of the talent. And a lot of these talents are the reason they became popular on social media is because they're super creative and they're not really business people. I mean, some of them are amazing business people. Like we look at like people like Mr. Beast who have like turned being a YouTuber into like a full fledged huge company. So some are very business minded, but some just like are posting videos and just happen to go viral or happen to get popular
Yeah.
and have like no business negotiating on their behalf. They're doing themselves a disservice by doing that. And that's where a talent manager would come in. And then same from the brand side, the brand the brand managers, like these are people with like MBAs that have years of experience. They're usually not like drilled down into the creator economy. Like they've got bigger issues. They're trying to figure out you know, ROAS on their advertising spend. They're trying to figure out, product development. Like they've got bigger fish to fry. So they hired these agencies to like manage all their comms. So those two middle people are sort of that bridge between the talent and the brand. However, when you're
Yeah.
talking about like these TikTok brands, brands where everything is on social media and they started, a year ago and their entire budget is influencer marketing, they might have an entire team of influencer marketers that are brand direct. But I'm talking like my experience is working on SC Johnson's, Smucker, like big, huge, like conglomerate companies. They're not touching influencer themselves. They're always working with an agency or multiple agencies.
And also, I want to add, like, for the brands who are dealing directly with influencers, executing a brand deal, it's a nightmare because there's a backend for the script for the TikTok, then you want to have like the assets from the creator. And to be honest, like not all the creators take the time to communicate properly with the brand. And so that's why it's important to have like a middleman. And like you said, Kelly, it could be like the PR agency or those platforms like Creator IQ, Influential, that kind of try to help to make the communication easy. But brands ultimately need a middleman. And even if the creators at first do not necessarily see the value of this middleman, PR agencies or managers, as their business is growing, then they feel the need to bring someone in their team. So when people take Mr. Beast as an example, what I want to say is Mr. Beast, he has a team. He has CEOs working with him. So I don't want to say that he's not a business person, but he hired like business people with him. And we should not underestimate, like what those people brought to him, right? Because Mr. Beast is producing so much content that I think maybe like more than 80% of his time is about like creating content, right?
Totally,
Yeah.
totally. I mean, the business mindset that he had to bring on those people, was smart. Like I highly doubt he crafted this entire business himself. It's the same with like Kylie Jenner cosmetics. It's like, she became a billionaire with their cosmetics line. The amount of work she actually probably put in. I mean, I'm sure she had creative insight and, said, let's do red this season. Like I'm sure she had those types of thoughts, but the
Mhm.
business powerhouses behind that are, that's what makes a company grow. So whether it's the brand having representation or the influencer having representation, it's important. You can't expect a brand's marketing team to do every single thing. That's why they bring on agencies. And you can't expect an influencer to know how to do every single thing for their business too.
And Kelly, I want to add something to your point. I work with talent managers, and the amount of email they have to send to brands in order to get deals is just like it's thousands of emails per month. I don't think a single influencer could do the same and still remain
Right,
creative.
exactly.
Because at one point, like you still have to be creative. And when it comes to brands and PR agencies, I think that this psychological element will be more likely to be impressed by a influencer because their manager reach out. So you're like, okay, you have a manager, so you're already at this level where you have representation. So you might have some brand deals in the past. You're already like more professional. The same way like in Hollywood, if you're a talent, you cannot reach out to a production without the support of your agent. And so I think that for influencers with no representation, sometimes for them it's hard to have like the best deals because it seems like they're not that professional because they don't have representation.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked directly with massive influencers that are amazing. Like not everyone needs management. I think yes, I think to your
Yeah.
point, like for the majority, yes. It does. I guess it's sort of a credibility thing. I mean, I if you do have talent manager, I know you're making enough money, so I know you've done lots of deals because if you are making less than $10,000 a year, having a manager makes no sense. Like you just wouldn't. So there's a level of credibility there, but some people like managing. Like there's famous like there's a lifestyle influencer. I can't remember who I'm thinking of at the moment, but she's been around since like 2008. Like she's been a blogger forever, and like she has always self-represented. And I like never understood it because I know she's making lots of money, but some people just choose to do that. So I think
Mhm.
your point's valid, but I also don't want people to think that, if they're at 100,000 followers and they're like, maybe I'm at that point, but I don't want to give away 20%. Like, don't feel pressured. I still to this day will
Mm.
work with talent that's amazing to work with. They have their invoices ready to go. They have their,
Mm.
vendor paperwork. Like they're like business people. They understand it. So it kind of just depends on the person too.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you brought up something earlier before we hit record on the podcast on currently, like we're talking about the market situation, right? It's a lot of different shifts. People are seeing inbounds aren't as popping as it was, let's say, even 4 or 5 months
Yes.
ago. It seems that now, even on the brand side, that as influencer coordinators, they're kind of, or brand managers, not necessarily fighting for their job, but things are a little more strict on where is the actual ROI coming from. And I know we were talking about like actually getting deals, and you were saying that sending 50 emails a day might not necessarily be the best approach. So I'm curious from your thoughts, if you're a talent manager, what are some insights you give on like, hey, this is how I would go about building these relationships? And
So much to say on this. So number one, like anyone that claims to say that there's like the best way to do it is don't listen to them. Like there is not a correct way to do it. Everyone has their own way. People see success in different ways. So I personally, this is my opinion, as someone from the brand side, do not think that spending even like 2 or 3 hours a day, I don't know how low it's like normal for a talent manager, outbound, like kind of spammy pitching or whatever, however you want to word it, but doing like mail merge type pitching is worth it because you might get, it's a numbers game. So out of the 300 pitches you sent that week, you might get two. Are they quality? Like if of those two, every time you do 300, you get $20,000 deals or something, keep doing it if it's working. I mean, that's a lot of work for two deals, but if it's working, it's working. My thought process and what I appreciate as someone that's receiving these emails is when I actually build real relationships with the talent manager and I can go to them when I have needs. I want to know you enough where I feel comfortable to email you and be like, here's what I'm working on. And I have like maybe like seven, I'd guess, talent managers that I have in my like world that I feel comfortable going to. Some of them are I'm even like friends with enough where I'll text them and I'll be like, just got a new like now that I'm freelancing, my jobs are changing all the time. So I'll be like, just got a new client with this alcohol brand. I think one of your girls would be perfect for it. Can you send me like her last metrics from the last campaign she did or something? Like some of it's that level of comfort, and some of it's just people that I've worked with that I'm like, hey, I like working with you. But that's the goal. You want the brands to be coming to you asking about your talent. And it comes from two things. It comes from your talent being interesting people that are consistently reinventing themselves, that are putting their lives out there, that have an interesting story to tell. And it also comes from you being fun to work with. Like, I can't tell you, I don't have like a blacklist or whatever people call it of like people I refuse to talk to. Like, I think that's like a little intense. But I do have like a mental list of like managers that have rubbed me the wrong way, maybe haven't been respectful, maybe were really, really slow at getting back to me. That's not to say I'll never work with them, but I'm not going to them first. That's for sure.
Mm.
I can think of like five off the top of my head that I like would not choose to want to work with. If one of my clients really wanted to work with their talent, I would suck it up and work with them. But that's the name of the game. The name of the game is like making real relationships in this space and having people be able to like rely on you. And instead of I just did a LinkedIn post about this and talent managers got in a little tizzy about it. They got really upset. So I basically what I said is there's two things that bother me. One is when you come to me asking what my budget is, because I'm never going to tell you that. And I can go on. If you are interested, I can explain why. And number two is when you, did you see this post? People were not happy with me. And then the second thing was when you just randomly send me your roster. And I can break this down because I think people are like, "Oh, she's runs a tight ship," but it's really not like it's not meant to be, a weird thing. Let's go into the roster thing because that's kind of what I was talking about. But the roster issue is I don't mind if you're checking in if we're friendly and you're like, "Hey, I got a new talent," or "I haven't sent you my roster in a while." That's totally fine out of the blue. When I come to you with a need and you reply to me with 50 names of men, women, black, white, kids, adults. How is that helpful for me? Like now I have to sift through 50 people and they're all your talent. That's serving you. That's not serving me. What is helpful is if I say, I need a 35-year-old girl in Chicago, and you say, I have the perfect girl for you, and you send me that girl. That's helpful for me. So my whole point is that you blasting out this, I mean, you're essentially a salesperson at that point. You're just selling me your list of talent that doesn't serve the brand. If I come to you and I'm like, I need to book or I need to cast like 50 people by tomorrow and they could be anyone, that's different, but that's just not how it works. I usually have a very specific list of requirements. And people were like, well, sometimes I send my roster and it's really helpful for them. And I'm like, maybe once in a while they're just looking for random people. But I'm telling you how it works. It's months of curating the perfect persona. So your roster of 50 people is not helpful. Like it's just not.
It makes total sense. It's really like it's total sense. You have a need and you have a problem. People need to come with a solution to this problem, not solution to other problems that you don't.
And I understand that I'm like demanding this sort of level of respect, but it is a transactional relationship in some way, and I'm the one paying the money. So while I'm very respectful for talent, like I said, I have many friends that are talent managers. I still need that level of respect just because of how the deal is going to go. Like I'm asking my client to put $20,000 or $50,000 or $100,000 into this person. I need you to like kind of cater to me in that situation so I feel comfortable
Yeah.
because my job is on the line. Like if you and I've had managers sort of be rude to me or, say this isn't working for me. And it's like, that's fine. But like, I want to work with someone that makes it easy because I'm putting a risk into working with you. There's a level of risk that I'm
Yeah.
taking on by working with your talent and I'm giving them a payday and you at the end of the day. So there is a level of
And
sort of like,
al- and
like weighted respect.
and also it can be a red flag because if you start a relationship with someone, you ask something quite precise, and the person is sending something else. You're like, okay,
Exactly.
how will I work with this person? Because if we start like this, like executing the brand deal might be
Well,
challenging,
I
right?
also think it's really rude to the talent. I mean, this just happened to me. I reached out to this agency about a specific girl. Like it was a specific type of girl. Like it was very obvious that I had like a person I wanted. Like she had this like weird talent thing. And they sent me back, "Do you need more options?" And I said, "No." I was respectful. I was like, "No, thank you." And they said, "Well, what else are you working on?" And I was like, "Not right now. I just really need to get this booked. Like I'm on a deadline. Like let's talk this girl." And they wouldn't stop. And I was like, "This isn't fair to the girl. Like I came to you for this girl.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Should I go tell her that you're pushing your 700 other people?" I mean, that's really not fair to the talent. And I finally was like,
Yeah.
"Please stop asking me about my other work and my other talent. I don't have any other work for you right now. I just need to know if this girl is available." And I don't want to have those conversations. Like I don't like, I'm trying to educate in a respectful way, but I mean, these are things that like I feel like talent managers need to be more thoughtful about.
Oh yeah,
And it's
of
good
course.
because like you're giving feedback. I don't think brands necessarily feel comfortable or take the time to give this feedback. So that's why this podcast is important. Is like we're in a safe place where we can have conversation. You are really respectful of talent managers. You come like you're sharing this from a good place.
Yes. Always from a good place. I just get passionate about it, but
Yeah.
it's from a good place.
Yeah, of course.
And we want to have the conversation to also improve the reputation of talent
Yes.
managers. Earlier, you mentioned something about your kind of seven agencies you feel comfortable to work with, at least the seven that you know pretty well. And it made me think about something. It made me think that just few talent management agencies, especially the kind of small ones, are working on their branding, on working on their personal branding and their reputation. Just few of them are hosting intimate events or even anything at all to just make them known by the industry. And so you end up having only like transactional communication with them. It's just like kind of this spammy emails about their roster, but you don't know them, right? And I feel like when you look at the big Hollywood agencies or the big like model agencies, the entrepreneurs behind those companies made sure that their brand would be attractive. Like brands will want to associate themselves with the agency. Talent will do whatever they could to be signed by those agencies. And I think in the creator economy, we still have a lot of work to do around like improving reputation when it comes to the mover and shakers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I agree because I think with the growth of influencers, where anyone like what you're saying earlier, Katie, a video can go viral tomorrow, and now all of a sudden you're getting brand inquiries because of that one video. Then it's very reactive. So a lot of talent, like it's very active, where people are, hey cousin, you want to help me with
Right.
some emails? Oh, I can, I've seen a movie on that
Right.
before. Let me see what I can do for you. And then you have these people that all of a sudden now are managers, and then I think it's very reactive where it's people just becoming managers because a friend wanted to, then another friend wants to, and all of a sudden they're doing it. But it's really interesting, when you talk about that whole roster thing and how to upsell properly. I think one of the things we've done in our agency is have a golden rule. If a deal comes in for one creator, we would not upsell until this goes through, or if it's okay that we know this talent doesn't want it, not nowhere near their rate, okay, let me see what I can do to accommodate. But the key number one thing we would say is let the deal go through, get all the way to reporting, and then even do a survey. And then the survey is what triggers us to then actually reach back out. And we've noticed when you kind of put a survey, it kind of gives the brand like you're subtly like giving them permission to reach out or not. And it's kind of interesting you say that about that aspect.
I love that. And I never have a problem if it's like a super nice, I can tell genuineness. That's not a word on the phone.
Yeah.
But like if I'm halfway through a program and it's going really well and you're like, a one-off email comes in and they're like, "Hey, we really like working with you." Like lead with that. Like lead for the reason before you just send it. "We really like working with you. You're really responsive. The brand seems awesome. Like I just wanted you to know that I have another talent that loves Nike or that loves Gatorade or that just had a baby. Like make it make sense for me. And then I might just be like, no, thank you. Let's finish this deal and then just wash your hands, you know? Or I might be like, thank you for
Mhm.
sending that. Like I'm gonna send them to my coworker who is doing another program. Like it doesn't hurt. It's about the approach. Like it's just I love how
Mm.
you're saying like you kind of wait till it closes and then you kind of like make sure it makes sense to reach back out. But so many, especially of these new talent managers that don't really understand how this all works, their entire mindset, because that's how they get paid. Like the commission based model is very pressure. It's a lot of pressure. So the second they hook a deal, they're like, I got to sink my teeth into this as much as I can. And you're really shooting yourself in the foot when you do that. That's not helping you.
I have a question about like long-term deals. So we discussed like, okay, this one-off deals, but I think your brand side and your talent manager side are really helpful for me to understand how can a talent manager convince a brand to do like just more than one brand deal? How, like, what are your advice about
Okay, well, I have
this?
lots of thoughts on this too. I just even in the way you approach the question, I know that talent managers want long-term deals. I get that. I just want to put it out there before we even get going on this topic that sometimes one-off deals are all we want and all we need. And there's never in a million years going to be a chance to extend that. And I think just understanding that and being okay with it and being able to like take no for an answer, I just want to get that seed in your head because sometimes I literally am doing a completely different campaign the next month. Like like the doing long term just doesn't even make sense. So, and that's again where people don't know how PR agencies work and how brands work and even influencer agencies these days. Sometimes a brand comes out and they're like, "We have $10,000 before the end of the year. Let's spend it." Like there's not even an opportunity to extend it. I will say there are things you can do if you sense that maybe there is the opportunity. And the first thing you can do is just ask. Just say, my client, my talent is really excited about this brand. They've been using them for years. They post about it organically. Let's turn, like, are you open to turning this into something more long term? I'd say probably 75% of the time they're just going to say no because I'm telling you that a lot of times things are just one off and we have to just accept that. But for those other maybe like 25% of the times, they might say, like, what did you have in mind? And then it's a great idea to come back and be
Mm.
like, they're already posting, and this is another point, and we can go into this, but they're already posting 5 times a month organically. So you're already getting all this added value. If you pay them monthly for 3 months, they'll do a live or they'll do, an extra reel or they'll do an event. But like, give me the reason why I should extend this relationship. And then back to that side point, if they're not posting organically about my brand and only posting when I pay them, I'm not doing a long-term deal with them because they're not truly a fan. That is my number one. If you take anything away from this podcast, my number one pet peeve is do not pitch a brand that the client hasn't already posted about and say that they're a fan. If it's a brand new product, that's different. But if it's like Neutrogena face wash and you're like, my client loves you and they do get ready with me's every day and you've never seen Neutrogena, the first thing I'm going to do is ask you never to message me again and say you're being
Mm.
unprofessional right now. So, this happens all the time. So but on the other side of that, if you said, my client's a huge Neutrogena fan, you just paid us to do one post with you. Thank you so much. She uses it every day. I don't know if you see, but every morning in her live TikTok, she's doing Neutrogena. I'm going to be like, wow, we're getting so much value from this girl who genuinely loves my product. You know what? Let's put her on a 6 month retainer. I'll pay her $300, every week or whatever for her to post a tip about Neutrogena, about something about Neutrogena or whatever. I'm much more compelled to want that person like on my payroll at that point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think allowing the brand to like dip their toes in the water first, still build a relationship, and then kind of build off that on the aspect. What's interesting of a challenge, right? You talk about these because there's a lot of frustration within the talent, especially with because I was an influencer back in 2017 before transitioning to the agency side before COVID. So I was able to then kind of transition back into influencer on the agency side. But a big part of it is a lot of these managers came up or developed during COVID as a reaction. So a lot of them are networking virtually. So it seems like, outbound and these other areas are really the only option that they have. So I'm kind of curious from your perspective, for those listening, if you're going to say, let's not do outbound, how can they start to build those genuine connections in that first round where maybe they aren't getting as many deals or have as many contacts?
I would say, I mean, it's really hard to this is another like misconception, but it's really hard to figure out, especially agency, like who works on what. Like I just talked to someone yesterday and he's like, do you
Mm,
know who works at Golan on this? And I'm like, I worked there like 2 years ago. Like the turnover is happening every day. People are leaving, going to other agencies. And I was just telling this to another person too. It's like you might work on an account for 3 months and then you go into work thinking you're still on that account. And your boss is like, oh, wait, you're on that account now. There's a new business pitch. You're going to do that. So there's no like secret way to like figure out who's working on what. And like it's more about the people. So I would say right now, community is everything. Like there's all these communities popping up. I'm going to give a shout out to Aura Community. It's ORAA. It was started by my friend Sabrina Jose and Jesse, who's a talent manager. But places like that, get involved in the community. Like go to events. I'm also part of WIM, Women in Influencer Marketing, which is
mm,
Jesse Grossman. You guys probably have seen her. She's amazing. But I mean, I like actively am part of this community every day. And the friends that I've made, especially on the talent side, are from these communities. So it takes a lot of networking, a lot of work. Right now in my freelance business, half of my business right now is networking. And I don't get paid for my networking, but it is important to me to like build those relationships and the foundation. So I don't have like a great answer. It's hard when you're 22 and you're managing your cousin and you're trying to figure all this out. Like it just takes time. You're not going to build these networks overnight,
Mm.
but it's a consistent motivation and consistent commitment is the word I was looking for to this industry and to getting to know people. And eventually you'll stumble upon a brand person who like you guys hit it off and they work on Hershey or they work on Mars or they work on whatever, and you have a person that loves candy and it's just going to make sense. But that's how those
yeah.
relationships form just over time.
Yeah, and Caddy, at OnScale, my company, we host breakfast and dinners for talent managers. So we had those events in London, New York, LA. We're about to have an event like this in Miami. We had like a branded house at Cannes Lions where we helped talent managers to connect. So I totally agree with you. First, it's kind of lonely to be a talent manager because like you're surrounded by talent, but they're not necessarily your peers, and you interact with brands or your clients. So it's always good to connect with other talent managers, but also it's an opportunity to discover new deals, right? And to build your reputation. So,
Yeah, I
100%.
think like attending those events is gonna show you more return. I feel like just go, give yourself a goal of like one or two events and like maybe join one or two communities or networking groups and start slow. Like don't, bombard people with networking opportunities, but just slowly start. We're lucky that COVID's over and we can actually like go to things in person again. We couldn't for so long. So, but I think if you go to those events and like really make an effort, that's going to show you a bigger return than just spamming 50 people every day. I personally, I think that the statistics on it are going to work in your favor.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point where you're really talking about sustainability from a business perspective, right? When you think of how there is still this endorphins of this quick influencer, a lot of these people are so used to, man, back in the day, which is only 3 years ago, it
Right.
was a simple boom rate. Sure, we'll take
Right.
it, because a
Exactly.
lot of brands were kind of just testing. And then 2021, end of 2021, these startups that were quick to spend get smarter. They start to shift. And then, early last year, you start to see more UGC is the future now because brands are realizing, wow, we need to actually be more effective with how we do it. But it's interesting because you do bring up a good point of where one of our best clients, she was at a different brand and I met her like a year and a half ago. Then she went to a new brand and we already had that
Yes.
relationship. So then, I was part of that relationship and kind of seeing where now those are where the stronger relationships are coming from. So yeah, I really think just to what you were saying, like people need to start realizing this is a long game,
Yes.
and some years, some quarters are higher than others, but it's more less like start thinking 3, 4, 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead. Where I feel like a lot of these managers are still thinking on a month to month
Yes.
basis, just because of the way they were introduced into the industry.
Like my inbox, if I could look at obviously I've worked at different jobs, so I don't have access to my old inboxes, but like my inbox in 2020 was like once a month, a talent manager would reach out with their roster and say, "Hey, how are you? Want to get lunch?" Like it was like so random, and I'd always respond. I'd be like, "Thank you." Like I'd even have talent reach out and be like, "Hey, I'm a stay-at-home mom blogger. Like I don't know how they found me, but like or someone gave me your name or whatever." And I'd always respond and be like, "Thank you so much for sending it. Like I work on Kimberly Clark and like all these things that might be a fit." I don't think I've ever really hired anyone from a cold pitch. I'm trying to think, maybe once, but I'd always like engage with them. I now, even as a freelancer, like I don't even work for a company. The amount of inbounds that I get, I probably get like 4 or 5 a day, and I've been in business for like 5 months. Like I don't even know how people are seeing. Like I'm not even tied to a big corporation, and it's like stuff that is like so random. Like I'm working right now on an alcohol client. Like it's a specific thing. That's what I'm casting, like, or I'm working on right now. Like some random like athlete will reach out. Like I'm just like it's madness. So you have to think about it from our inbox management too. And when I say four, someone at Golan or at Ketchum or one of the big agencies is probably getting 50 a day, if not 100. It's turned into how like sales emails used to be for like platforms and
Yeah,
tech. That's what it's like now, managing individual people that happen to find you on LinkedIn and find your email, talent managers that you know, talent managers that you don't know. My name is on so many lists. I get emails all the time where they're like, I saw you on blah, blah, blah list because my information has been sold to these lists. So you got to think of it that way too. Like, where if the ghosting thing, it drives me nuts because I didn't give you permission to email me. So I'm not ghosting you. I never gave you permission in the first place to reach out to me. And I probably don't want to be on the list that I'm on. So I have an issue with that term too because I feel like they're like, oh, brands always ghost us. I'm like, we never told you to email us in the first place. Like,
yeah, exactly, exactly. And it's interesting because I know what you mean sometimes, and not to like in the kind of management community, right? It's all these individuals coming together, kind of therapeutic community sometimes, where I feel that as passionate as they still need to remember the bottom line, and that their job to the influencer is very much objective driven to grow the brand. So these challenges that they're facing, it's up to them to really figure out if someone's not ghosting me, what am I doing to make them ghost me, or what's a different way to
yeah,
attract. I think kind of goes back to like traditional marketers where they don't see 100 ghosts as in no one's reaching out. It's 100 ghosts, but 6 people open the email.
right.
What am I doing? Okay, like right. So instead of start seeing more like that, and instead of a back in the day, VidCon 8 years ago was like this. Now VidCon's like
Yeah,
this, not the same. Well, you know, industry is changing.
right.
You know, how are you leveraging the change to shift your company and things like that? So it's very interesting to see and hear your perspective of things. Of kind of going back to the end of the day, where it's not about being transactional; it's about growing a business and these things you still have to think of, and
But
why an influencer is relying on you as a manager in the first place.
but Tinashe, I think it's okay to have like transactional relationship as long as people are professional, right?
Yeah,
At the end of the day, it's a business. It's okay. Be transactional, but be respectful. One thing I wanted to add earlier is the influencer marketing is a big industry with just few people working on it. And like you said, like you had this relationship with this person, then she moved to a new company. It's just like you have to be careful of how you treat people because the decision maker are kind of the same. It's a pool of 1,000 people. And even if, like, there's a lot of money, it's just like few people. So it's really important to first build your reputation, be respectful. And also, when you bring value to people at the right time, they reply to your email. It's just like timing and value.
Yes, thoughtfulness. Being thoughtful is like
yeah,
such an
yeah.
underutilized thing. It's like, yeah, I mean, that's like why like people got so upset about that roster thing, and I didn't even go over the budget thing. I don't know if you guys want to talk about that, but it's not about like doing it or not doing it. It's not this like black and white line that you can't cross. It's about reading the situation, reading the person, and like making a thoughtful decision. Like that's really what it comes down to.
Mm.
But let me go back to the budget thing. So I said two things that drive me nuts about talent managers, which is probably a not so nice way to start a LinkedIn post, but I was feeling it that day. And the first one we went over was the roster thing, which I discussed. But the second one was when So annoying. It's when the first thing out of their mouth when I send a list of deliverables is what is your budget? And I want to explain why because I know talent managers like freak out when I say this. The reason is, and this again, everything is caveated. If you're direct with a brand that only does influencer marketing, they probably have a budget. Or if you're working with like someone on LinkedIn that or someone on TikTok that like started their own like eyelashes or something, and it's their company, they probably have a budget. Like smaller brands, they might just shoot you a number because they're working off a tight budget. Let me just tell you that my budgets have been up to like millions of dollars. I would never in a million years tell you that. Like I'm not going to tell you what I'm working with because it doesn't really like impact you. And I know you're just thinking about yourself, but I'm not thinking about you. I'm thinking about how I'm going to split up this $1 million. So that question, it like I'm not trying to be dramatic, but it almost comes off as like insulting because I'm like, why is that even relevant to you? Like you're the one doing the work. Sorry, I just hit the microphone. You're the one doing the work, your client or you're doing the work. You're the one taking the time. You're the one that might have to get a babysitter. You're the one that might have to hire a makeup artist. You're the one that might have to like not go to work that day because you're shooting. Like I don't know those things. I can't put a value on your time, your effort, your energy. I don't know how much you like my brand. Like you might hate my brand and you want more money. Like you might or not hate it, but you might not like really really like it that much and it's going to be more work. Like there's so many things that go into it that I can't place value on. So there's a lot of reasons why I also just prefer the negotiation of like you telling me what your idea is and then me either being like that's way too high, are you willing to negotiate, yes or no, and usually they're like sure because they know they sent an inflated number, but someone has to throw the first number out and I don't think it should fall on the brand. That's just my opinion, and I also
Yeah.
think too that it's to the benefit of the talent. Because if you say, what's your budget? I am going to tell you the lowest possible number I can think of because you're asking me to throw something out of nowhere. If you come back and you're like $5,000 and I really wanted to pay you four, I might just say, okay. Like, I think you really do get a better deal. That has happened so many times where someone's like, my goal in my head is like around four, and they'll come back with like 4,700. And I'm like, you know what? I don't feel like negotiating. I have a little bit of wiggle room. You can have your rate. That happens so often. And I don't think talent managers realize that. I am being 100% transparent. Because if I would have gone to you first, I would have said two. And you would have come back at three. You would
Yeah,
have got three.
exactly.
So I'm telling you, it makes more sense to weigh your value, have a number that you're going to walk at. Like, definitely don't let someone offer you $100 when you wanted 10,000. That's crazy. Have a number you're going to walk at and have a number that's your stretch goal, but you need to be the first person to throw out that number.
And you also have, as a talent manager, you have to know your industry. You have to know, like what are the deals right now in the market, like have some history, some data points. Otherwise, you miss some opportunities. So if you don't know your industry, if you don't know like the deals that are negotiated like for the first quarter, it's hard to go to a brand and ask like for their budget. Like you'd be like,
Right? Because then how am I going to negotiate with
you should be a professional. You should know.
right? If you come to me and you're like, well, I don't even know like where to start, how am I going to negotiate with you? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Exactly.
how am I going to go
Yeah.
back and forth if you're coming to me? I will say if it's a brand new talent manager or if it's a talent that like truly seems confused and I really want to work with them and they seem genuine, I've had people do that where they're like, I don't even know what to say. Like, I've had mostly on TikTok because they're people that are newer. I've had people be like, Katie, I don't know you very well, but like, I just don't know what to charge. And I feel like I'm going to give you a number that's like wrong, and I'm willing to sort of help guide you because I want both sides to win. And I'll say, I was looking for around 2 to 3,000. Does that sound fair? And they'll come back and they'll be like, oh my God, like that's amazing. Like, can we land at 2,500? And I'll be like, done. And it's such an easy negotiation. So if you're truly, truly like unsure, if it's like a pharmaceutical company or something that's like maybe a little bit outside the box, I'm totally open to like having that dialogue. But what I don't want is for you to be like, well, tell me your budget. And then I'm like, well, I'm not
Yeah.
going to. And they're like, well, you tell me before I tell you. And I'm like, I'm not playing this game. I'll just move down my list.
Yeah, and it's a good point too. Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say it's almost like walking into the mechanic and asking for a rate, and then being like, "What's your budget?"
Exactly.
Like, what do you mean? What's
Yeah.
my? You should tell me. Like, you're the one doing the service and everything like that.
Exactly.
And it's funny too because a lot of managers, when we first started a few years ago, it was that ghosting, right? It was, oh crap, I gave them a high number, they're ghosting me. Where in reality, I think it kind of goes back to what you're saying, how you even say, how you said, it's how they approach, it's the way they're doing it. Like you can tell when someone might give a high price, but they might say we're willing to be negotiable, open to it. But you can tell when some people are like 25K,
End of
very
story. Right.
short, and then also hit you with the extra roster too, just in case
Right.
you want a couple extra. Where then it doesn't really
But
feel like, okay, this is someone I can work with. They seem like they're too busy and just want to get something out.
Exactly.
but then Tinashe, there's this question about training. We need to figure out a way to educate and train talent managers because ultimately, if there's a lot of like inexperienced talent manager that are coming to you, Kelly, it's a problem for their roster. Like you as a talent, having your rep having huge doubts about how to pitch you and how much to charge. It's an issue. Like we do this podcast to help educate the market, but I'm very confused because I feel like the problem is even bigger than what we thought.
So recently I've seen there's like this push for like standardization. There's some people that want this like
Yeah.
standardization, and I am like so opposed to that because it
It's,
makes to me it makes literally no sense. Like again, it's the value. Like I always give the example. I've worked with like really rich stay-at-home moms that are bloggers that do not need the money. Like they like getting that $5,000 check here and there to like buy a new handbag, but they do not need the money. Like they're doing this as a side hustle, and if I reach out to them from like Tiffany's or like a really prestigious like high-end brand, they're like, I'll do this for 500 bucks. I don't care. Like they might have a million followers because to them it truly doesn't matter. I mean, everyone wants money, but I just give that example to show that like not everyone is like gritting their teeth to get the most money. Like I if we standardized it, like it doesn't everyone has a different coming in point. Then there's people that have like millions of followers on TikTok that don't know what the heck they're doing. I did a video with someone 3 years ago when like it was just all getting started and she had a million followers and I asked her for her rate and she said $300. And I literally was like, I'm paying you more than that. Like I mean, like that's crazy. Like
yeah.
I've done that too. And I think the talent managers are like, no way she ever did that. I've done that. I've actually educated
Yes.
influencers on the fact that
Same.
they're way underpaid. And I was working on a Fortune 100 company. There was no chance I was going to pay her $300. I was like, I gave her much less than I would give someone else because she was starting so low. But I gave her what I thought was like at least fair for the amount of work it was going to be. Also, I deserved that discount because she was horrible to work with. She didn't know what she was doing. So like
Yeah.
it should have been, you know what I mean?
No.
Like the $1,000 or
No.
whatever
Yeah.
I paid her that I pay
Yeah.
someone else maybe 5,000 for, or maybe not
Yeah.
five, but maybe like 2,000 or whatever. I worked double on her work than I would have on someone else. So you have to think of that stuff too. Like there's no such thing in no planet where I think standardization. We've seen it. We've seen people try and it just doesn't work. Your amount of work is different than my amount of work. My love for this brand is different than your love for this brand. It might take my old client, it took her 5 minutes to do an amazing reel. She was like a graphic designer. She had background in video production. For her to do a reel was like literally 5 minutes out of her day. Whereas some people to do a reel is like 6 weeks. It takes them forever. So like
Yeah.
they're gonna price
Yeah,
differently.
yeah.
Like all those things go into every single campaign. So so there isn't a right
And,
answer. That's why these dialogues with the brand are so important because you want to get the best rate, but like what makes sense for whatever you're offering the brand.
and the reason why I'm also against standardization is first, a talent is not just selling their, they're not only selling their time. They're selling their, like image, their identity. This content will be out there for years, right? And it can affect them. The second thing is maybe those like creators will have 3 or 5 good years while they're making their money. And after this, years of fame, it might be hard for them to find a new job, like a regular job when they go back to normal life. And they better have money aside, savings. So it's also not only charging for today, they're charging for tomorrow to have, like enough money to reinvent themselves, have a new life, right? So it's like when a brand is approaching a creator, asking them to do like content, it's just more than just content for now. It's there's way more in
Yeah.
line.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess to wrap, the last thing I'll say about that, because it looks like we're getting the time here, is yeah, I definitely do agree with that because once you standardize, it's always going to be in favor of the brand, or else what's going to happen is if it's too high, brands are going to find new solutions, and you're going to kind of slowly see where I think the beauty of being in the space and even having our brand clients that we have and we go do campaigns is where they'll come and say, "Hey, we only have this much this month. I know it wasn't from last month. Can you make it work?" "Oh yeah, of course." "Oh, man, I know last time you looked out for me, but this time I'm going to
Right.
actually bring up your price, right?" I think it's having confidence in yourself, actually caring and being passionate about your work, and knowing that I feel sometimes there's this paranoia where people feel like the other person is trying to get them. So they're always looking at ways where in reality, if you start trusting people and show that you care, it will come back and people will remember it in a room. And you're right, because there's sometimes where one creator was a highlight of a campaign, but next campaign, we pitched them just because they were good, but they were primary. But we like working with them, and they might be half the price, but they still take it because they like the
Yeah.
relationship. So you're right. I think standardizing is very challenging to do, and would cause brands to find other solutions.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about like organic posting, like talent managers for a while. I think most of them now I think have come around to the fact that you need to post organically if you want to work with that brand. Like that's how we source our creators is when we look through tags of who's posted about us. But there was a while where they were like, never post for free, like you're giving it away. And I was just like, this is all exchange. Like, why? I used to work on IKEA for a year. I ran IKEA social or influencer work. I was at an agency. I worked directly with the brand manager who was in charge of like their influencer. And she had a very strict rule for me. I was the one that found all the talent. I did all the briefing. The PR team kind of set the tone of like what was being talked about, but I did all the like logistics with the influencers and found them. And our clients' one rule was that they have to have talked about us organically. I wasn't even allowed to go out to like some furniture guru or some interior designer that I loved their style if they weren't talking about IKEA. That was like their rule. And a lot of brands are doing that and it's
Mm.
smart. Like why would they reward someone with money who's not already a fan? Like that's just how it works. And but to your point, it's like if I see that you're doing a ton of organic, I might throw you a couple extra bucks the next time we do a sponsored post because I'm getting so much added value from you as a person. And if I need, if I come to you and there's a month and I'm like, I only have $1,000, what can you do for me? I've done that too, where I'm like, I really want a reel and a story sequence and a TikTok, but I only have $1,000. Like, what can you give me? And if sometimes an influencer will be like, you know what, I like you, I'll give you all of it. Sometimes they'll be like, for that amount of money, that's just not going to work, but I'm happy to do a reel for you. And I'll remember that. I'll be like, you know what, you saved me. I only had $1,000. You really helped me out get this program wrapped up. I'm throwing you the big bucks next time I have money. So it all comes back in the wash.
There's one thing I'd like to discuss. Like, I know we're out of time, but it's really important for me. Is I was at Cannes Lions last week, and some big influencers were there, but also big stars like Rihanna were there. And I saw how some CMOs were super excited to meet some influencers because they were like big fan of those influencers. So those influencers were stars to the eyes of those CMOs. But most influencers are like models on a runway during the Paris Fashion Week. They're just like interesting people who are wearing something, but there's no excitement around meeting them. And I don't understand why talent managers are not trying to build like a fandom and turn their creators into stars, because then brands will be more excited to work with this particular influencer because it's just more than conversion. If we want to associate their image with this influencer. Do you have any thought about this?
It goes back to like the foundational principles of PR and just creating buzz. And I think a good talent manager understands how PR works and how communications work. And, yeah, I totally, I mean, back in the day, or not really back in the day, but early influencer days when I would hire an influencer and we had so much money. Like we were just throwing money at influencers. Like I had like essentially no budget. they just wanted certain people. We'd always bake in, especially with like expert type people like nutritionists or like fitness gurus, we'd always build in press interviews. And I think that's a great kind of like way from a brand perspective to get more bang from your buck and also like to kind of catapult this social media person that lives their head lives on a TikTok video screen into like turning them into a real spokesperson. Like there's ways to kind of bring them outside of this like little social media bubble into the real world. Have them host an event or go to a retreat. Like there's so many ways outside of just our mobile phones. Like they live in our phones to get them out there. But I also was going to say to your point about like celebrities, like there's still that level of like we call it like the halo effect kind of. It's like even celebrities don't convert well. Like nobody converts well on social. I mean, there's ways to do conversion programs and I have lots of thoughts on that. We can talk about that another time. But for the most part, like someone posting a brand on TikTok, unless it like just goes insanely viral and it's some weird thing that no one's ever used, like it typically isn't going to like convert that well. Like it's just the nature of how social media works. People are there to be entertained. They're not there to be sold to for the most part. And we've seen that change a little bit with TikTok, but you know what I'm saying. But someone like Rihanna posting isn't like the goal shouldn't be like how much sales did we get the next day? Like she's going to give a bump in sales, but the idea is that this like amazing songwriter, person in the ether, person that's part of the zeitgeist decided to work with us. Like that alone has so much value. So because I have brands that are like, oh, celebrities are out, I could just go work with an influencer. And I'm like, there's still something there with that like level of like household name recognition and the alignment of aligning your brand with these people. Because there was this push where it's like everything's micro influencer, like screw the big influencers,
Yeah.
everything's micro. And I'm like, it depends. Like everything in this industry, there are times when like take your 20 grand and get 75 micros and pay them all $100, whatever that math is. But you might want to take that $75,000 and work with Rihanna because just one Instagram story from her could go a really long way. So that goes back to being really, again, thoughtful and the brand having someone that's really deep into strategy and not just putting a bunch of tactics on a email, but really thinking through what are the goals of this program and how am I going to get there in the most effective and efficient way.
Oh, amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for those nuggets that you shared with us. Is there anything that we didn't ask you that you want to share with the audience?
If you are a business owner or a new marketer or a student or someone that just wants to sort of brush up on your influencer marketing, I would really, really love for you to go to influencerinsiderguide.com. I have a book on there. It's like 28 pages and it's everything start to finish of what brands do when they do a campaign. So it's how we go about creating our rosters, how we vet our influencers, how we check for fake followers. Like it's everything that like a brand mind is doing all the way through recapping and getting analytics. And I am coming out soon with more resources for talent managers and talent of like what are the best ways to like everything we talked about today, but going really in depth on like the insider information of how to get the best brand deals. Because I really want talent managers to be successful. I want influencers to make this their business. Like we're in such an amazing period in the world where like you can create your own business online and just being the face of your own company. So I want to like close the gap between the two sides. So and also follow me on
I
LinkedIn. I like
love
to get
it.
into like feisty conversations with people.
Definitely. And is there someone that you can nominate to join us as a guest in the podcast, this
I have
podcast?
so many. I can send you a whole list. I have some amazing talent manager friends, people on the brand side. But yeah, I can send you a ton of people.
Do you have an Do you have a name like
I
one
have
off the
to
top of
shout
Yeah. So
out.
usually
Oh,
we
you
yeah.
shout
Go
out on
ahead.
the podcast. I have to shout out
Yeah.
Joanna Voss because she's like my podcast buddy. We go on each other's shows all the time. Like we share guest recommendations. But Joanna runs Joanna Voss Agency. She mostly represents
Mhm.
older women. So like women like 40, I say older, 40 is like not old, but 40 plus, old for social media and all diverse. So she's got lots of Latino women, some black women, and in different markets, different industries. So there's lots of food. She's got an amazing woman in her 60s that's like a yogi that does amazing yoga poses and wellness. but I've used her for like menopause products. I've used her talent for eye drop brands I was working on, kind of like random things. But like that's a perfect example of someone that's like in my arsenal because she's got a very niche group of talent. But Joanna's amazing. She just spoke at either VidCon or one of the influencer marketing shows, and she'd be a great guest. So I will definitely give you her information.
Perfect, perfect. And I've actually heard of. I've had some communication with Joanna. Actually, I was looking for Hispanic creators. So yeah, so thank you for that shout out. That's awesome. I'm gonna make sure to follow up with her and let her know we chatted.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, hope everyone had a good episode. This was really insightful. We got really in the nitty gritties and very transparent with this one. So for those of you watching, thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode.